The morning sun cast long shadows through the tall windows of the Earth Council chamber. Commander Lisa Reeves stood before the semicircle of council members, her hand steady as she activated the holographic display. The blue light from the projection filled the room, showing countless red dots moving across the star map. "Council members," she said, her voice clear and firm. "What you're seeing is the Zaxthar invasion fleet. Our deep space sensors detected them crossing the Kuiper Belt yesterday." She zoomed in on the cluster of red dots, revealing hundreds of warships moving in perfect formation. The council chamber fell silent. 12 pairs of eyes stared at the threatening display. Council member Peter Walsh leaned forward in his chair, his weathered face showing deep concern. At 65, he was one of the oldest members of the council, and he had seen humanity through many challenges. "How long do we have, Commander?" Walsh asked, his fingers drumming against the wooden table. "At their current speed, 5 days until they reach Jupiter's orbit," Lisa replied. She switched the display to show a timeline projection. "Our analysts believe they'll make their first stop there to regroup before launching their main assault." Amy Barrett, the youngest council member at 38, stood up from her seat. Her usual calm demeanor had given way to visible worry. "Do we know their intentions? Have they made any attempts to communicate?" Lisa shook her head. "No, Council Member Barrett, but their fleet formation matches known attack patterns we've observed in other systems. They're not here for diplomacy." The room erupted in worried whispers. The Zaxthar had been a growing threat in the galaxy for the past decade, but they had never ventured this close to Earth before. Their reputation preceded them. Worlds that refused to submit to their rule were stripped of resources and left uninhabitable. Peter Walsh cleared his throat, silencing the room. "Then perhaps it's time we showed them why attacking Earth would be their biggest mistake." He pressed a button on his console, and a new image appeared alongside the fleet projection. "I propose we activate the Energy Grid project." Several council members gasped. Amy Barrett's face paled. "The grid? Peter, it hasn't even completed its final testing phase. We don't know if it will work as intended. And we may never get another chance to find out," Walsh countered. He stood up, his tall frame casting a shadow across the chamber floor. "Commander Reeves, what's the status of our conventional defenses against a fleet of this size?" Lisa's expression grew grimmer. "Even with our entire fleet mobilized, simulations give us a survival probability of less than 30%. The Zaxthar ships outclass ours in both weaponry and shielding." Walsh nodded, then turned to address the whole council. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've spent the last 15 years building the grid in secret. It's the most ambitious defense project in human history. If there was ever a time to use it, it's now." "But the power requirements," Amy protested. "The solar collectors around Mercury aren't fully calibrated. If we try to channel that much energy through an untested system, then we risk destroying our own solar system." Walsh finished for her. "Yes, but if we do nothing, the Zaxthar will do it for us, only much more slowly and painfully." Lisa stepped forward again. "Council members, if I may." She waited for Walsh's nod before continuing. "I've studied the Zaxthar's campaign history. They've conquered 17 systems in the past decade. Do you know why they've been so successful?" She paused, looking each council member in the eye. "Because no one ever showed them humanity's greatest strength, our ability to take impossible risks when our backs are against the wall." The chamber fell silent again, but this time it was different. The fear was still there, but something else had joined it. Determination. Council leader Margaret Chen stood up. "We'll put it to a vote. The motion is to activate the Energy Grid project as our primary defense against the Zaxthar invasion fleet. All in favor?" One by one, hands raised across the chamber. Even Amy Barrett, after a moment's hesitation, raised hers. The vote was unanimous. "Motion carried," Margaret announced. "Commander Reeves, you have full authority to coordinate with the grid team. Council Member Walsh will be your liaison." Lisa saluted sharply. "Thank you, Council. I'll head to Luna Base immediately to oversee the preparations. As the council members filed out of the chamber, Peter Walsh caught up with Lisa. Commander, there's something you should know. He handed her a datapad. These are the latest power calculations for the grid. The numbers aren't good. Lisa scanned the figures, her heart sinking. The containment fields won't hold at these levels. Walsh nodded grimly. That's why I'm sending you to work directly with the grid's chief engineer, Kevin Morris. If anyone can solve this problem, it's him. He placed a hand on her shoulder. And Lisa, don't tell the council about these numbers. They're scared enough as it is. Lisa tucked the pad into her uniform pocket. Understood, sir. But what about Dr. Mitchell? She designed most of the grid's core systems. Susan's already on her way to Luna Base. She'll meet you there. Walsh looked out the window at the peaceful Earth below. 5 days, Commander. That's all we have to turn the most powerful energy collection system ever built into a weapon that can save humanity. Lisa straightened her uniform and headed for the door. Then we better not waste any time, sir. As she walked through the council building's corridors, her mind was already racing with plans. The grid had been theoretical when she first learned about it 3 years ago. A network of energy collectors and transmitters that could harness the sun's power on an unprecedented scale. Now it had to work, or humanity would face extinction. Her communicator beeped with a message from Luna Base. Kevin Morris was already assembling his team. Good. They would need every minute of the next 5 days. Outside, the sun continued to shine peacefully on Earth, its rays bouncing off the gleaming buildings of New Geneva. Most of the people going about their daily lives had no idea that high above them, humanity's fate was hanging by a thread. And if Lisa and her team did their jobs right, they never would. She reached the transport pad and input the coordinates for Luna Base. As the teleportation field hummed to life around her, Lisa took one last look at the blue sky. Somewhere out there, the Zaxthar were coming, confident in their superior technology and overwhelming numbers. They were about to learn that humanity wasn't so easily conquered. Deep beneath the moon's surface, Luna Base hummed with activity. Chief Engineer Kevin Morris stood in the main control room, surrounded by glowing screens and busy technicians. His usually neat brown hair was messy from running his hands through it too many times, and empty coffee cups littered his workstation. "Show me the mercury collectors again," he said to no one in particular. The main screen lit up with a view of the massive solar collection arrays that circled humanity's innermost planet. Each collector was a masterpiece of engineering, designed to gather and channel the sun's immense power. Dr. Susan Mitchell walked into the control room, her tablet displaying streams of data. She had been working nonstop since arriving from Earth 12 hours ago. "Kevin, we have a problem with the power distribution network." Kevin turned to face her, noting the worry lines around her eyes. "What kind of problem?" "The kind that could tear the solar system apart." Susan pulled up a simulation on the main screen. "Look at these power readings. The energy levels we need to stop the Zaxthar fleet are way beyond what our containment fields were designed to handle." Commander Lisa Reeves entered just in time to hear this. "Can we strengthen the containment fields?" she asked, joining them at the control station. Kevin shook his head. "Not in 4 days. We'd need to rebuild half the relay stations." He pointed to the string of satellites that formed the backbone of the grid. These were meant to channel solar power to Earth and the colonies, not create a weapon. "Then we need to think differently," Lisa said. She studied the display showing the grid's layout across the solar system. "Instead of containing the energy, what if we used its destructive potential?" Susan's eyes widened. "You mean deliberately create energy corridors that would tear apart anything passing through them?" She began typing rapidly on her tablet. "It could work, but the timing would have to be perfect. One miscalculation, and we could fry our own ships." Kevin walked to another screen showing the mercury collectors. "We'd need to reconfigure the entire collection array. Right now, they're set to gather energy slowly and safely." He pressed a few buttons, bringing up the collector's specifications. "But if we removed some of the safety protocols, We could gather enough power to create the corridors, Susan finished. But Kevin, that's incredibly dangerous. We'd be running the collectors at 200% capacity. They weren't built for that kind of strain. Lisa looked between the two engineers. Do we have a choice? The room fell silent except for the constant hum of equipment. After a long moment, Kevin straightened up. No, we don't. Let's get to work. The next 3 days passed in a blur of activity. Kevin's team worked around the clock, modifying the mercury collectors while Susan led the effort to reprogram the grid's control systems. The plan was ambitious. Turn the solar system itself into a weapon. On the morning of the 4th day, Kevin stood in front of his main engineering team. Today we test the modified grid, he announced. If it works, we'll have the most powerful defensive weapon ever created. If it fails, he didn't need to finish the sentence. Susan joined him at the front of the room. We've mapped out 10 energy corridors that we can create using the grid. Each one is a controlled pathway of destructive solar energy that should tear apart any ships caught inside it. She displayed a map showing the planned corridors. The tricky part will be timing. We'll need perfect coordination with the fleet to make sure our ships stay clear. In the observation deck above the control room, Lisa watched the preparations with Peter Walsh, who had arrived from Earth to witness the test. Will it work? Walsh asked quietly. It has to, Lisa replied. She checked her watch. The Zaxthar fleet will reach Jupiter's orbit in less than 24 hours. Below them, Kevin's voice rang out. Beginning test sequence. All stations, report in. One by one, the station controllers called out their readiness. Susan stood at the main power control station, her hands hovering over the controls. Mercury collectors responding. Power levels rising. On the main screen, they could see the massive collectors turning to face the sun directly. Energy readings began to climb rapidly. 30% capacity, Susan called out. 40%. 50%. Kevin watched the structural integrity readings carefully. Collector arrays are holding. Continue power increase. 70%. 80%. Susan's voice remained steady, but her knuckles were white on the control panel. 90%. Warning lights began flashing across the control boards. Containment fields at maximum stress. Someone called out. Sir, we're redlining. Keep going, Kevin ordered. He moved to Susan's station. We need to know if they'll hold at full power. 95%. 98%. 100%. Susan announced. The room held its breath. For a moment, everything seemed fine. Then alarms began blaring. Containment breach in Sector 7. A technician shouted. We're losing control of the power flow. Shut it down, Kevin yelled. Emergency shutdown. All collectors. Susan's fingers flew over the controls. The power readings began dropping rapidly, but not before a burst of solar energy escaped the grid. On the main screen, they watched as the energy pulse destroyed 3 small asteroids in its path. When the system finally went quiet, Kevin slumped in his chair. Well, now we know what happens when we lose containment. Lisa came down from the observation deck. Can you fix it? Susan was already analyzing the data. Yes, I think so. The breach happened because the energy flow wasn't properly balanced. We need to adjust the collector angles by 0.3 degrees and recalibrate the containment field harmonics. How long? Lisa asked. 6 hours for the adjustments, then another 2 for testing, Kevin replied. He looked at the clock on the wall. We'll be cutting it close, but we'll be ready when the Zaxthar arrive. Peter Walsh joined them in the control room. Commander Reeves, we just received an update from the outer system sensors. The Zaxthar fleet has increased speed. They'll reach Jupiter's orbit in 18 hours. Lisa's expression hardened. Then we have 18 hours to turn this grid into humanity's shield. Kevin, Susan, what do you need? More coffee, Kevin said with a grim smile. And every engineer who can hold a toolkit. We're going to modify all 57 collectors before that fleet arrives. Done, Lisa said. She turned to leave, then paused. When we activate this thing for real, what are our chances? Susan looked up from her calculations. If it works perfectly, we might save humanity. If it fails, she glanced at the destroyed asteroids on the screen. We might do the Zaxthar's job for them. Then we better make sure it works perfectly, Lisa said. She headed for the door. I'll coordinate with the fleet. They need to know exactly where those energy corridors will be. As she left, Kevin turned to his team. You heard the commander. Everyone who isn't essential to running this facility gets suited up. We have collectors to modify. Outside Luna Base, Earth hung in the black sky like a blue jewel. Soon, that view would either show humanity's greatest triumph or its last moments. Kevin pushed the thought away and focused on his work. They had 18 hours to make history, or become it. Admiral Christopher Hayes stood on the bridge of the Starship Independence, watching the massive gas giant Jupiter fill half the view screen. Around his ship, 200 vessels of the Earth Defense Fleet held position in a defensive formation. Each ship's crew was silent, waiting. Status report, he ordered, breaking the tense silence. All ships in position, Admiral, his first officer replied. The Zaxthar fleet will exit hyperspace in approximately 20 minutes. The Admiral nodded, then opened a channel to Luna Base. Hayes to control. How's our grid looking? Kevin Morris's tired voice came through. Ready as it'll ever be. Admiral, Dr. Mitchell has the collectors at standby power. We can bring them to full strength in 90 seconds. Let's hope that's fast enough, Hayes muttered. He turned to his communications officer. Get me Council Representative Rodriguez. Maria Rodriguez appeared on a side screen. She was in the Independence's diplomatic chamber, one deck below. Her usually perfect uniform showed signs of a sleepless night. Admiral, I'm ready to attempt communication when they arrive. Good, but keep your distance from the main transmitter. If they respond with weapons, I want you clear of any potential damage. Hayes had seen too many peaceful missions end in violence to take chances. The minutes ticked by slowly. On the bridge, officers checked and rechecked their stations. The fleet's weapons remained powered down, a sign of peaceful intentions that Hayes hoped wouldn't get them all killed. Sir, the sensor officer called out. Multiple hyperspace signatures detected. The space in front of the fleet suddenly lit up with swirling purple energy. One by one, massive ships began emerging. Each Zaxthar vessel was easily twice the size of the Independence, their dark hulls covered in strange, glowing patterns. Count 347 enemy ships, the sensor officer reported. Their weapons are hot, sir. Hayes straightened in his chair. Hold position. Ms. Rodriguez, you're up. Maria's voice came over the fleet-wide channel, calm and clear. Attention Zaxthar fleet. This is Maria Rodriguez, representative of the Human Council. We wish to open peaceful dialogue and understand the purpose of your presence in our system. For 30 long seconds, there was no response. Then a harsh, metallic voice filled the communication channels. We are the Zaxthar Dominion. Your species has been deemed unworthy of independence. Surrender your worlds and submit to our rule, or face extinction. Maria tried again. Surely we can discuss this. The human race has much to offer as allies rather than subjects. We request a face-to-face meeting, Toe. The transmission cut off as the first Zaxthar ship fired. A brilliant green beam of energy shot past the Independence, missing by meters. Warning shot, Hayes announced. All ships, defensive positions. Maria, get to safety. We're done talking. He opened a channel to Luna Base. Kevin, how long until the grid is ready? We need another 10 minutes to reach full power. Kevin's voice was strained. The collectors are still spinning up. Hayes watched as the Zaxthar fleet began to move forward. We don't have 10 minutes. Launch fighters. All ships, protect the Jupiter colonies. Space erupted in chaos as both fleets engaged. Human fighters poured from their carrier ships, while Zaxthar vessels launched strange, organic-looking pods that moved like living things. Sir, They're targeting the Europa colony. An officer shouted. Second and third squadron, intercept those ships. Hayes ordered. He watched as 40 human vessels broke formation to defend the moon colony. First squadron with me. We need to buy the grid more time. The Independence shuddered as it took its first hit. Shields at 80%, someone reported. Their weapons are stronger than we expected. Through the viewport, Hayes could see human ships fighting bravely against the larger alien vessels. The Zaxthar technology was obviously superior, but human pilots were proving more creative. A small corvette managed to take down a Zaxthar ship 3 times its size by exploiting a blind spot in its defenses. Admiral, his communications officer called out. We're getting distress calls from the Ganymede mining station. They're under direct attack. Hayes slammed his fist on his armrest. Where's that grid power? 5 more minutes. Kevin's voice was almost drowned out by alarms in the background. We're pushing the collectors as hard as we dare. The battle continued to rage. Human ships fought desperately, using Jupiter's strong magnetic field and numerous moons for cover. But they were heavily outnumbered, and the Zaxthar ships were steadily pushing forward. Sir, we've lost the Harrison and the Stellar Dawn, his first officer reported grimly. 12 other ships reporting critical damage. A massive explosion lit up space as one of the Ganymede defense platforms was destroyed. Hayes watched helplessly as debris rained down on the moon's surface. All ships fall back to secondary positions, he ordered. We need to tighten our defense line. He opened another channel. Kevin, we're running out of options here. 2 minutes. Kevin shouted back. Admiral, when we activate the grid, you'll have 30 seconds to get your ships clear of the energy corridors. The timing has to be perfect. Hayes nodded to his tactical officer. Send the corridor coordinates to all ships. The moment we get the signal from Luna Base, everyone moves to their assigned safe zones. More explosions lit up space as the battle intensified. The Zaxthar seemed to sense victory was near, pressing their attack with increasing aggression. Their ships moved in complex patterns that made them difficult to target, while their weapons easily penetrated human shields. Admiral, his sensor officer called out, I'm detecting power spikes from the enemy fleet. They appear to be charging some kind of main weapon. Hayes watched as the Zaxthar ships began to align in a new formation. Energy started building between their vessels, creating a web of destructive power. All ships, evasive maneuvers, he ordered. Whatever they're charging up, we don't want to be in its way. The Independence turned hard to port just as a massive energy beam cut through space where it had been moments before. 3 human ships that couldn't move fast enough were vaporized instantly. Kevin, Hayes shouted into his comm. Tell me you're ready. 30 seconds, came the reply. Get your ships clear now. Hayes hit the fleet-wide channel. All vessels, emergency maneuvers. Get to your assigned safe zones immediately. The space around Jupiter became a dance of desperation as human ships broke away from their battles, racing to predetermined positions. The Zaxthar, mistaking this for a retreat, began to press forward more aggressively. 10 seconds. Kevin's voice counted down. 9, 8. Hayes watched as his fleet moved into position. Not everyone would make it in time. 5, 4. The Zaxthar fleet's main weapon began charging again. 3, 2. All hands, brace for power surge. Hayes ordered. 1. Grid activated. The space around Jupiter suddenly lit up brighter than the sun itself as the energy grid came to life. Hayes had to shield his eyes as massive corridors of pure solar energy burst into existence, cutting through space like giant glowing blades. The battle was about to enter its final phase, and humanity's fate hung in the balance. In Luna Base's control center, Kevin Morris watched as the power readings shot past all previous records. The mercury collectors glowed white-hot on his screens, channeling more solar energy than humanity had ever attempted to control before. Containment fields holding. Susan Mitchell called out from her station. Her fingers flew across the controls, adjusting power flows microscopically. Energy corridors are forming exactly as planned. The main display showed the space around Jupiter transformed into a deadly maze of pure energy. The corridors of solar power cut through space like giant glowing rivers, each one capable of destroying anything in its path. Ground control to Admiral Hayes. Daniel Cooper called from his coordination station. First wave of corridors is stable. You have control for Phase 2. On the Independence's bridge, Admiral Hayes watched the incredible display of power with a mix of awe and determination. Understood. Ground control. All ships, execute Pattern Delta. Let's show them how we planned this dance. The human fleet moved with precise coordination, their previous retreat suddenly transforming into a complex battle plan. Ships weaved between the energy corridors, using them as cover and forcing the Zaxthar fleet to split up to pursue them. The aliens are taking the bait, Daniel reported, tracking both fleets' movements. They're following our ships into the corridor maze. In space, the Zaxthar ships, still confident in their superior technology, pursued the human vessels. Their dark hulls stood out sharply against the brilliant energy streams that now filled space around Jupiter. Now, Hayes ordered, spring the trap. Kevin's team at Luna Base responded instantly, activating secondary collectors. He watched as another set of solar collectors around Mercury powered up, new corridors forming in 3, 2, 1. The space battlefield transformed again as new energy corridors burst into existence, cutting off the Zaxthar ship's escape routes. Several alien vessels, caught off guard by the sudden change, flew directly into the deadly streams of energy. Direct hits, Susan called out. 5 enemy ships destroyed on contact with the corridors. The Zaxthar fleet's organized formation broke apart as ships tried desperately to avoid the lethal energy streams. Their previous confidence gave way to chaos as they realized they were trapped in a carefully planned maze of destruction. They're trying to regroup, Hayes observed from the Independence. Daniel, time for Phase 3. Let's show them the full power of this grid. Daniel nodded to Kevin through the video link. Initiating Phase 3. All collectors to maximum output. Kevin took a deep breath. You heard him. Take all safety limiters offline. Give it everything we've got. The control room erupted in activity as technicians worked to channel even more power through the grid. Warning alarms blared as the collectors pushed far beyond their designed limits. Sir, Collector 7 is showing signs of stress fractures. A technician shouted. Reroute power through the backup units, Kevin ordered. We can't stop now. Susan's hands moved in a blur across her console, energy corridor intensity increasing by 40%. The Zaxthar shields won't be able to handle this level of power. In space, the energy corridors grew brighter and wider. The Zaxthar ships that had survived the initial trap now found themselves being herded into smaller and smaller safe zones. Their fleet is splitting up, Hayes reported. 3 groups trying to escape in different directions. Not happening, Kevin said grimly. He typed in a new sequence of commands. Activating the containment net. Now. New energy corridors sprang to life, forming a massive sphere around the main body of the Zaxthar fleet. The alien ships were now completely surrounded by walls of deadly solar energy. Admiral, Daniel called out, you have a clear shot at their command ship. The corridors will give you cover from their support vessels. Hayes didn't hesitate. All available ships, form up on me. We're taking out their leadership. The Independence led a squadron of human ships through a carefully planned route between the energy corridors. The massive Zaxthar command ship loomed ahead of them, its weapons firing desperately at the approaching human fleet. Their weapons are getting weaker, Susan reported, monitoring the battle data. The energy corridors are disrupting their power systems. Kevin watched the power readings climb even higher, collectors at 120% capacity. We're way past the safety margin now. Keep it together, Susan urged, both to the team and the equipment. Just a few more minutes. In space, the battle reached its climax. The Independence and its squadron broke through the last line of Zaxthar defenders, their weapons blazing. The alien command ship shields, already weakened by the energy grid's effects, began to fail. All ships, concentrate fire on their main reactor. Hayes ordered. This ends now. The combined firepower of the human squadron struck the Zaxthar command ship's vulnerable spots. For a moment, nothing happened. Then massive explosions began chain reacting across its hull. Their command ship is breaking up, Daniel announced. Secondary explosions detected throughout their fleet. They're losing power across all vessels. Kevin saw his chance. This is it. Initiating final power surge. The energy corridors flared blindingly bright. The remaining Zaxthar ships, their systems already damaged, found themselves being pulled apart by the sheer force of the concentrated solar energy. Multiple ships breaking up, Susan reported, her voice tight with tension. The grid is tearing through their hull plating like it's paper. On the Independence's bridge, Hayes watched as the mighty Zaxthar fleet began to disintegrate. All human ships, fall back to safe distances. Let the grid finish this. The energy corridors continued their deadly work, systematically destroying or disabling every Zaxthar ship caught in their web. The few alien vessels that managed to escape the trap fled immediately, jumping into hyperspace without looking back. Enemy fleet is in full retreat, Daniel announced. Remaining ships are escaping the solar system. In Luna Base, Kevin finally allowed himself to breathe. Power levels stabilizing. Beginning emergency shutdown sequence. Susan's hand shook as she helped power down the grid. Collector damage reports coming in. We pushed them to the absolute limit, but they held together. The energy corridors began to fade, leaving behind a debris field of destroyed Zaxthar ships. The space around Jupiter slowly returned to normal, though it would never be quite the same again. Luna Base to Admiral Hayes, Kevin called. Grid shutdown complete. How does it look up there? Hayes stood on his bridge, surveying the aftermath. Like humanity just showed the galaxy why you don't underestimate us. Well done, everyone. Well done. As the human fleet regrouped and began rescue operations for damaged ships, Kevin looked at his team in the control room. They were exhausted, but proud. They had taken the most ambitious engineering project in human history and turned it into a weapon that had saved their species. Dr. Mitchell, he said, turning to Susan, I believe we just made history. Susan managed a tired smile. Let's hope we never have to do it again. But they all knew that the galaxy would never be the same. Humanity had demonstrated its power, and the survivors of the Zaxthar fleet would spread the word. Earth was not to be trifled with. 1 week after the battle at Jupiter, the Earth Council chamber was packed with representatives from every human colony. The mood was very different from the fear-filled meeting that had started it all. Now, pride and relief filled the air. Lieutenant Grace Martinez stood at attention before the council, preparing to give her report on the counter-offensive she had led. Behind her, a hologram showed the scattered remains of the Zaxthar fleet still floating near Jupiter. The cleanup operation is proceeding ahead of schedule, she reported. Our teams have already recovered significant amounts of alien technology from the debris field. The Science Division is particularly interested in their shield generators. Council member Peter Walsh nodded approvingly. And what about the mercury collectors? Have we assessed the damage? Kevin Morris stepped forward to answer that question. He looked much more rested now, though the dark circles under his eyes hadn't completely faded. 6 collectors suffered major damage during the battle. Another 14 show signs of stress fractures. But considering we pushed them to more than double their design capacity, I'd call that a win. A win indeed. Council leader Margaret Chen agreed. She turned to Dr. Susan Mitchell. Doctor, what have we learned about the grid's capabilities? Susan activated her own display, showing detailed power readings from the battle. The grid exceeded all our expectations. We now know it can safely operate at much higher power levels than originally thought. With some modifications, we could even set up a permanent defensive network. Which brings us to our next point, Margaret said. She pressed a button, and the chamber's main screen lit up with a new image. It showed dozens of alien ships approaching the solar system. But these weren't Zaxthar vessels. First contact requests, she explained. We've received messages from 7 different species in the past 3 days. It seems our demonstration of the grid has attracted quite a bit of attention. Admiral Hayes, standing near the back of the chamber, stepped forward. Not all of it friendly, I assume. Actually, Maria Rodriguez interjected, most of them are seeking alliances. The Zaxthar have been a terror in this sector for decades. No one else had been able to stand up to them until now. The chamber buzzed with excited whispers. Humanity had gone from facing extinction to becoming a major power in the galaxy in just 1 week. Commander Lisa Reeves, who had been quietly observing until now, raised an important question. What about the surviving Zaxthar ships? Our long-range sensors show them regrouping at the edge of their territory. Let them, Lieutenant Martinez said firmly. They've seen what we can do. And next time, we'll be even better prepared. Kevin nodded in agreement. We're already working on improvements to the grid. The energy corridors can be made more precise, more controlled. And with what we learned from their salvage technology, we can make our ships stronger too. Which is why, Council Leader Chen announced, the Council has unanimously voted to establish the Solar Defense Initiative. She gestured to the various officials in the room. Everyone in this chamber will have a role to play. We're expanding the grid, strengthening our fleet, and preparing for whatever comes next. Daniel Cooper, who had coordinated so well with the fleet during the battle, spoke up from his seat. The grid control systems can be improved too. We're developing new software that will let us create and modify energy corridors much faster. And our diplomatic efforts? Walsh asked, looking at Maria. She smiled confidently. The survivors of the Zaxthar fleet have spread the word. 3 of their former subject worlds have already reached out to us, seeking protection and trade agreements. Humanity is no longer just another species to be conquered. We're becoming a force for stability in this sector of space. The council chamber's mood grew more serious as Margaret Chen stood to make her final announcement. Which brings us to our most important decision. The grid was built in secret, tested in desperate times, and proved more powerful than we ever imagined. The question now is, how do we use this power responsibly? Susan stepped forward again. If I may. At Chen's nod, she continued. The grid was designed to power colonies and support exploration. Yes, we've proven it can be a devastating weapon. But its real purpose should be to help life flourish, not destroy it. Agreed, Hayes said. We should maintain its defensive capabilities, but focus on its peaceful applications. Show the galaxy that humanity can be both strong and wise. Looking around the chamber, Lisa saw heads nodding in agreement. The fear that had filled this room just days ago had been replaced by something better, hope tempered with responsibility. Then let's make it official, Margaret declared. The Solar Defense Initiative will have 2 main objectives: protecting humanity and promoting peace through strength. We'll expand the grid, but primarily for its intended purpose of supporting colonies and exploration. Its weapon capabilities will remain our last resort. Peter Walsh stood up. I move to approve this initiative and begin implementation immediately. Seconded. Amy Barrett called out, speaking for the first time. The vote that followed was unanimous. As the meeting concluded, Kevin found himself standing with Susan near one of the chamber's large windows. Earth hung beautiful and peaceful in the view, though now he could see the faint shimmer of energy corridors in standby mode, ready to protect their home if needed. You know, Susan said quietly, when we first designed the grid, I never imagined it would make humanity a galactic power. Kevin smiled. Sometimes the best innovations come from desperate times. The question is, what do we do with it now? We build, Lisa said, joining them at the window. We explore. We protect. And we remember that our greatest strength isn't the grid itself, but the human spirit that created it. Outside the council building, life in New Geneva continued as normal. Most people going about their daily lives didn't know all the details of what had happened at Jupiter. They didn't need to. They only knew that humanity had faced its greatest challenge and emerged stronger. In orbit, the energy grid hummed quietly, its corridors invisible but ready. Mercury's collectors gathered the sun's power more gently now, sending it to colonies and ships throughout the solar system. And in deep space, the word was spreading. A new power had risen in the galaxy, one that had defeated the mighty Zaxthar fleet. But in the council chamber, the leaders of humanity knew their real work was just beginning. They had shown the galaxy humanity's strength. Now they had to show its wisdom. As the sun set over New Geneva, its light caught the faint shimmer of an energy corridor far above. To most it looked like nothing more than a strange aurora. But to those who knew the truth, it was a reminder. Humanity had taken its stand among the stars, and the universe would never be quite the same again.